Right now, buying a mid-range smartphone could be the worst decision you ever make. With so many models on the market, it's extremely easy to get it wrong, and it's an expensive mistake too. But don't worry, after testing hundreds of phones from every brand and model out there, today I'm going to show you the only 7 mid-range phones that are actually worth buying right now. And trust me, a lot of them aren't the ones you'd expect. The first model that many people choose, and why you need to be careful, let's start with a classic. It's an old familiar face that's been appearing in best mid-range lists for several years now, across previous generations. I'm talking, of course, about a Xiaomi Redmi Note, specifically the 14 Pro. It was officially unveiled in September 2024, but it didn't reach most markets until early 2025. In fact, as I'm recording this video right now, the Redmi Note 15 series already exists in China. And of course, we'll have to wait a few more months for the global version to arrive on this side of the Atlantic. That's why I'm not recommending those yet. Anyone familiar with this space knows that the Redmi Note family has been the benchmark for mid-range value for money for several generations now, roughly since the Note 4 or 5, though the 7 and 8 were also standout hits. From those early days until today, they've excelled at bringing features typically found in more expensive phones, delivering solid performance, and, most importantly, doing it all at an affordable price. The 14 Pro comes in 2 variants, a 4G version and a 5G version. The 5G is by far the one I recommend, thanks to its IP68 certification, full dust and water resistance, even submersible, and its MediaTek Dimensity 7300 Ultra chipset. All that, combined with up to 12 GB of RAM and 512 GB of storage, pushes it to over 728,000 points on AnTuTu, putting it very close to upper mid-range or premium mid-range territory, but that's only if you get the 5G model. If you go for the 4G version, you're stuck with a EE.UU G79 * that barely breaks 400,000 on the same benchmark, objectively about half as fast, and honestly unusable for everyday tasks. Trust me, with that processor, you won't even be able to run basic apps smoothly, and that's just sad. And if you add HyperOS on top, which is essentially the same as the old MIUI but even heavier, you can imagine how sluggish it feels. As I've said and repeated many times on this channel, software matters a lot. Some people undervalue it and prioritize raw hardware specs instead, but that's a big mistake. And if you don't believe me, just ask Motorola with their G75, which launched in October 2024 running Android 14 but will keep getting major OS updates for another 5 years and security patches for up to 6. That's what real longevity and long-term thinking look like. We're living in a world where people, and companies too, care more about trends that last 2 or 3 months than about how things actually hold up after a few years, which is why we keep seeing new ultra-thin, ultra-pretty phones that are also ultra-disposable. But just as there are manufacturers chasing every fad, there are others genuinely trying to build something solid, a phone for life, not just for the moment, and that's Motorola's whole strategy. The G75 has MIL-STD 810H certification, meaning military-grade durability, so it's practically indestructible. That's why it doesn't have a curved AMOLED screen like you see on some competitors. Infinix comes to mind. By the way, there's no Infinix in this top list. I'd ask production why, because I definitely wanted to include one. Instead, it uses a 6.78-inch LTPS LCD panel with up to 2388 pixel resolution, 387 ppi density, and a 120 Hz refresh rate. I've seen a lot of criticism about this screen choice, and sure, Motorola does have other models with AMOLED and even curved displays, but the brand's overall approach is all about solidity, toughness, and durability. It's kind of a lighter version of what Google does with its main Pixel lineup, which brings me to the 9A, one of those phones that's pretty hard to find but incredibly interesting. Launched in March 2025, it packs Google's Tensor G5 processor, 8 GB of RAM, up to 256 GB of internal storage, and a compact but excellent 6.3-inch OLED display with 1080 by 2420 pixel resolution, 421 ppi density, and a max refresh rate of 120 Hz. All of this is powered by a 5100 mAh battery with around 23W fast charging. On paper the specs might look limited, which is exactly why I decided to buy one. My girlfriend has been using it as her secondary phone for months now. She even has several videos about it on her channel. And even though it's not the most popular or easiest to track down, I literally went around the world to get one. We're talking about perhaps the only mid-range phone that gets up to 7 years of OS updates and another 7 years of security patches, taking Motorola's longevity concept to the next level, which makes total sense coming from Google, the owner of Android. On the camera side, This is one of my favorite aspects, not just of the 9A but of Pixels in general, because their strategy focuses mainly on post-processing optimization, the magic that happens after you press the shutter button. Having 500 lenses is useless if the system doesn't know how to make the most of them. This phone represents that more elegant and understated mid-range segment, where RAW and 2.2 scores aren't everything, though it does break 1,000,000 points, so it's far from bad. And instead the priorities are things like the OS, long-term updates, software optimization, build materials, and overall assembly quality, another area that often gets overlooked. Among the few manufacturers who still value this is Samsung, which has been perfecting mobile devices since 1988, and it really shows when you hold the Galaxy A56, a phone I've reviewed extensively on the channel many times, that clearly demonstrates the brand's mid-range strategy. Not chasing flashy processor names or inflated benchmarks, but letting their name and reputation do the heavy lifting by delivering a well-made, refined product. The moment I took it out of the box, I could tell it felt way more expensive than it actually is, and that's exactly the point. They want to bring the premium Galaxy S Ultra experience to phones that pretty much anyone could afford, at least in theory, though initially one issue was inflated pricing in some markets, but now that it's been out for a while you can find it at a much fairer price, making this one of the best times to get it. Unlike many competing models, it stands out with real metal and glass construction instead of the painted plastic that's so trendy these days, giving the A56 a noticeable premium feel and durability. On the software side, it gets up to 4 years of security patches and 3 years of OS updates. And this last point is one of the most divisive things about the A56, since some people defend One UI as one of the best Android skins or software layers out there, while others accuse them of becoming increasingly similar to Xiaomi, drifting away from the philosophy of minimalism and a highly optimized operating system like Motorola does. One clear example is the Edge 60 Fusion. It launched in April 2025, so it's still very new to the market, but it's quickly becoming a favorite for many people thanks to features like its screen, which achieves 92% front surface utilization with almost no bezels, borders, or notches. It has a resolution of 1220 by 2712 pixels, a 20:9 aspect ratio, and 446 ppi density, meaning everything you view on it, from text to images, videos, series, and movies, looks excellent, noticeably better than most of its competition. The maximum 120Hz refresh rate also ensures smooth fluidity, which stands out on this kind of device thanks to the minimalism and excellent system optimization. Motorola uses something very close to stock Android, like what Google does on its Pixels. They make a few modifications, but it remains incredibly well optimized, so scrolling through the interface and general interaction with the device feel great, and because it doesn't have tons of background processes running unnecessarily. The 5000 mAh battery with up to 68W fast charging and reverse charging lasts longer. On the camera side, it has 3 lenses with a main 50-megapixel Sony sensor, and perhaps most impressive of all is the price. It doesn't even reach $300 in many places, though due to a huge number of variables it can be more expensive in some countries, but even in extreme cases it's still pretty well justified compared to the competition. Of course, its Dimensity 7300 averages around 640,000 points on AnTuTu, which is more than enough to run the vast majority of everyday apps and even some games without issues. But if you're really looking for raw power, you'll need to look elsewhere, specifically at Realme's GT7 series, which includes the GT7T, GT7, and GT7 Pro, with prices starting around $360. The standard GT7, for example, packs the Dimensity 9400C that scores over 2,100,000 points on AnTuTu, thanks in large part to its incredible up to 24GB of LPDDR5X RAM and maximum 1024GB of internal storage. It's a beast from any angle. It also has a 7000 mAh battery, yes, you heard that right, with up to 120W fast charging, a screen with touch sampling up to 360Hz, and IP69 certification. Not 67 or 68, but 69, the A56 has clearly inferior IP67. Unfortunately, getting this or any similar phone in many markets is practically impossible, and even when you can, the price is often so inflated that it no longer makes sense. So how do we make sure we get the absolute best while spending the least? It sounds utopian, like a dream, something impossible to achieve. However, there is a brand that has been dedicated to this for several generations now. I'm talking about none other than Poco. In February 2025, the brand unveiled a phone that, for under $300, promised over 1,600,000 points on AnTuTu, performance rivaling true flagships that usually cost more than $1,000, along with up to 12GB of RAM, a 6000 mAh battery, up to 90W fast charging, and, for the first time in the lineup, full IP68 dust and water resistance that even makes it submersible. None of its predecessors had been this complete across so many areas, which is probably why it broke sales records and stands as the best mid-range value-for-money phone you can buy right now, or does it? Just a few months later, in June 2025, the same brand launched the Poco F7, a device very similar to the X7 Pro but equipped with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 processor that pushes it past 2 million points on AnTuTu, plus significantly more premium build materials. Many people argue that, objectively, this one is the better buy. So, there you have it, the only 7 mid-range phones that are truly worth your money right now in this flooded market. The Xiaomi Redmi Note 14 Pro 5G, if you pick the right variant, the ultra-durable Motorola Moto G75, the incredibly long-supported Google Pixel 9a, the premium-feeling Samsung Galaxy A56, the clean and fluid Motorola Edge 60 Fusion, the powerhouse Realme GT7 series for those who crave raw performance, and the unbeatable value kings from Poco, whether you go for the record breaking X7 Pro or step up to the even more premium F7. These aren't the flashy, trend-chasing devices that'll feel outdated in a year. They're the ones built with real thought, whether it's longevity, optimization, build quality, cameras, or sheer power, proving you don't have to spend flagship money to get something that'll last and perform brilliantly. Pick the one that matches what you value most: battery life, software updates, durability, photography, or speed. Do your research on local pricing and availability, and you'll avoid the expensive mistakes so many people make in this segment. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments which of these you'd buy or if I missed your favorite, and I'll see you in the next one.